Hello and welcome to another episode of Soulwise with me, Semily Sherry. And in this one, I want to talk a little bit more about story and how I see that as so powerful for many reasons, and in particular, explore imagination, which is such an active part of story. So, a few years ago, I heard a piece on the radio which spoke about the decline in the number of parents reading stories to their children. And that made me really sad, and I thought that was a great shame. I have really fond memories of bedtime sessions with my two sons. And when they were small, the Harry Potter books were being published and were a massive rage and igniting excitement in children. And I absolutely loved bringing those and other books to life, complete with silly accents and crazy facial expressions. I have to confess I wasn't sure who was enjoying it more in the end, them or me. I still love a good story. And even in this age of TV and computer games, so do kids. If you've ever watched an enthralled audience hanging on to every word from the gifted storytellers of our time, like Daniel Morden. In the past, story was the only medium for passing on important information and ancient wisdom. And it worked because it was immediate, dramatic, personal, and memorable. It's much easier to remember something if you can also remember a feeling that was generated within you at the same time. For example, if you were holding your sides and aching with laughter, or you were peeping out from behind your hands in terror when you heard something. Stories speak to our soul because they tap into universal human concerns, problems and dilemmas through archetypes. An archetype is an original blueprint of behaviour or way of being, which is then repeated everywhere else throughout the world. And that is why the ancient Greek myths are still so popular and meaningful today. And have you noticed how the film industry uses Shakespeare and other classic stories for their plot lines more and more? I'm going to share a little bit more about archetypes and explore exactly what they are a little later on. But for now, in a world where it's easy to become disconnected, one person from another, generation from generation, culture from culture, stories can bridge those gaps, showing that we're all in essence the same and that we're not alone in our experiences, good or bad. Through story, we can share the very heart of who we are and the values and beliefs that shape our families, communities, and cultures. And there's tremendous healing power in that. Through story, we can lift ourselves out of the present moment and circumstance and allow our spirits to soar above perceived limitations and barriers. There is magic in that. And by sharing our personal stories with each other, we can help each other with difficult choices, raise awareness of the possible traps that lie in wait for us, become inspired to take our lives in different directions and make sense of our experiences. By learning about and understanding someone else and their journey through life, we find that we actually understand ourselves more clearly. And there is eternal power in that. And to explore it a little more, the very important thing I feel about story, and I'm including poetry in that because poetry is sharing the story of a personal experience. And sometimes, indeed, as in a ballad or an epic story. I'm thinking about Tennyson's The Faerie Queene, for example. That engages the imagination. And it does that because you have to provide the images that go with the words. Everyone who's listening or reading will have to provide the images that go with the words, and they will be unique to you. And that's something that doesn't happen with computer games or TV and film. That's already presented to you. But when you're reading or listening, there may be similarities, of course, but how you see a character in a story or a book will be very particular to you and never quite the same as the person next to you. And when you have an active imagination, it's that imagination that enables you to see beyond the limitations of what currently exists, of physical reality, and also then the current paradigm or social structures. Through imagination, you're liberating and opening your mind up to the new and to possibilities that don't yet exist. Latest science now sees the universe, the cosmos, as a unified consciousness and intelligence. And if you take that to be true, and science is proving that now, everything that is, everything that exists begins with a thought, an idea, a spark within the consciousness of this cosmic intelligence. So when you imagine, you're planting the seed of a possible reality. It is the first step to manifestation. So to return to archetypes then, I don't believe they are just structures that explain certain behaviours or feelings. I also believe they are living beings in their own right. And they live within the imagination. That's where archetypes live. The same cast of characters in archetypes appear across the world in very, very varied and different cultures. For example, you have archetypes like the magician, the wicked queen, the trickster, the wise old woman, the animal helper. They exist in all these cultures because they are real. They have a life and an awareness of their own. So often people ask me, when we're talking about developing psychic knowing and awareness and trusting intuition, the question I probably most often get asked is, how do I know I'm not just imagining it? And I always kind of laugh and say, well, you are. Because imagination is the way the multidimensional realms, the otherworld, communicates with us. They don't have a physical being, a reality. They don't have language in the same way that we do. So the otherworld, the multidimensional realms, use images to speak to us and convey messages. So when people ask, am I imagining? I say yes, and that's a good thing. That's what psychic intuition and awareness is. The thing you have to be careful with, of course, is that you are properly grounded. And by that I mean you have a connection to the earth, you remain firmly centered within your body. And so what happens then is usually You'll know you're receiving a true intuition rather than just going off into the fantasy realms, which it is possible to do, but you'll know it's a true intuition because you will have a physical response that goes along with that. It can be a shiver down the spine, it can be hairs rising on the back of your neck, or goosebumps emerging on your arms, or sometimes just a warmth and an opening sensation in the heart, and a deep sense of peace and rightness. So it is imagination, but usually you will have a grounded physical response in your body to tell you that it is that it has a resonance with you, that it is true and right. So knowing that is why I put such an emphasis on story and poetry and art and creativity and anything that inspires and expands the imagination, because that is the way that we communicate with the other world, with the multidimensional realms, and therefore with the divine. Everything starts as a spark of consciousness in the imagination. So I really encourage everyone to ask, what archetypes are most alive for you in your life? And often it's helpful to look back at your childhood, which we were nearly all read fairy tales or stories or books or myths when we were young, or we encountered them in whatever way. Which archetypes or characters, which stories resonated most with you? Which ones captured your imagination as a child? They very likely were and are pointing you towards the archetypal energies within your own soul and the purpose that it came here to fulfill. So that's the true power of imagination and story, and how it links to spiritual and psychic development. I truly believe they are one and the same thing. And we will never change the world unless we can imagine something better. Which brings me around to ending on a story, a novel in fact, that I want to recommend to you. Very timely, it's literally just been made available, or it is about to be made available, depending on when you hear this podcast. It's a novel called Any Human Power by a tremendously talented writer called Manda Scott. And it's a political thriller set around the lead up to the next general election in the UK, which, in a wonderful act of synchronicity, has just been announced. I am recording this on the 26th of May, and we literally only a couple of days ago had the announcement that the next UK general election will be held on July the 4th. So Manda has written this incredible political thriller, which also presents to us an image of the world that we can create if we hold spiritual values at the core of what we do. And she also presents the techniques, the tools, the structures, the approaches we need to get there, all wrapped up in an incredibly exciting and, I guarantee, well-written story. I haven't read it yet, I haven't got it yet because it hasn't yet come out. But I just know, having read her amazing Boudica novels, that it will be a tremendous, inspiring, thought-provoking and deeply wise read. So there you go, check out Manda Scott's Any Human Power. It's available in paperback form, I believe, and it will be available on Kindle immediately. So you can get hold of it in any way. And if anyone can sum up what I've been trying to talk about in this podcast, the power of story, the power of imagination, and the archetypes, the divine archetypes that appear and influence and bring their messages through in that genre, in that milieu, then Amanda Scott is the woman to do it. So I'm going to be ordering it. In fact, I'm going to pre-order it so that it arrives on my Kindle the minute it's available. And I highly encourage you to do so. And I think there are, as I've mentioned before, there are too many dystopias. There are too many disastrous visions of our future out there. We need to have those that encourage us to imagine a different world and to know that that's possible. As I said, that's how the divine intelligence works. That's how the cosmos works. So let's do it. Let's use our imaginations to bring into being, to plant the seeds of a much more beautiful world, a world that we would be proud to leave to future generations. Sending you, as always, my love and blessings, and saying for now, goodbye and happy reading, and I'll see you next time.